a little bit about what she's been doing trying to help other people. And following Kay, David Scott, who's come all the way down from Scotland, but he spent a lot of time helping Robert Green. And I think you're going to tell the audience a little bit about some of the wheelings and dealings of the legal system around Robert. So what we thought this would do was, while the jury is doing serious stuff, this would just give you a little snapshot into two more experiences of the utter corruption and brutality is actually the right word amongst our police and legal system. So, Kay, if you'd like to come up. You in the light. Okay. So you're at your best. Okay.
Hi, everybody. This one, thanks. Hi. My name's Kay Woodward. For my sins, I'm Melanie Shaw's, for people that don't know me, I'm Melanie Shaw's lay advocate Mackenzie friend. And I've been doing that sort of work now for about 12 years or so. A couple of years ago, I came to the attention of the police myself, totally unconnected to that role. I became aware that through a data protection request that I made for some information, that my signature was being forged for an education provider to obtain funding. That funding was coming through the Skills Funding Agency via the DWP, the Department for Education, the Department for Business Innovation and Skills. I quickly realised, looking at all the information I had, that it was quite a massive thing that was going on, because within my disclosure there were details of lots of other people's personal information. I have a background in the civil service, and I was concerned about the misappropriation of public money in addition to my own personal information being misused. So I went to the police thinking that it's my public duty to report this, and so I initially went to the police. I took all the evidence that I had and asked to make a statement and for someone to investigate it under the Fraud Act 2006. Initially I was told they didn't consider that it was an issue that they needed to look at, it was not really relevant, and basically to just go away. I then went home and rang the Met, because the organisation concerned are based in London. And they were quite interested and said, oh, your local police force need to investigate this because of where you live. And so I went back to them again, and again they said, oh, just go home and ring Action Fraud, which I did. A couple of months went by and I didn't get any response from anybody, so I rang them again, and was quite insistent, I have to say, because I was getting more concerned that my signature was still being used to obtain funding. And I also became aware of lots of other people. I was then in touch with other people that this was happening to as well. And really just cutting it short, I then went to see my MP. I went to a public meeting that the Police and Crime Commissioner and the Chief Constable were at. At that meeting, it was filmed by the BBC and it went out on our local radio. And I actually challenged the Chief Constable and said, I've come to you with a crime and it's not been investigated. And it was, oh, please sit down, please sit down. And I refused to do that. And I said, if you're expecting me to have trust, faith and confidence in you as a Chief Constable, then I don't. And when I come to you as a citizen with an issue that needs to be investigated, you're refusing to investigate it. I think that's a crime. And he agreed to speak to me at the end, which he did. Put me in touch with his chief superintendent, and then every time I emailed him I was just ignored, so I persisted. I had an appointment. I sat down with a detective and a sergeant who looked through all the information and said, oh, this is a massive fraud, this is very unusual, we've not seen one like this before, and again just sent me off on my way. I then got in touch with some other ladies that I knew, and they put in a request for their information, and we discovered that exactly the same had happened to them. So collectively we said, well, okay, 4 of us will go to the police station. So we made an appointment Went to the police station, and there were two detectives who clearly weren't interested, but were just going through the motions. So they took some information from us and said, oh, we'll come out and see you and take statements. You know that they're not going to do that. So we were about to leave, and the other three ladies left in front of me, and suddenly the door was blocked, and all I can describe as a kangaroo jumped in front of me and told me that I was under arrest. And that was because I was a suspect in harassment, harassing the police. So the scenario went on, so that I was arrested. It was a really hot day, and the cells at that police station were being renovated, so I was then taken on a detour of the city to another police station. All I can say to you, not ever having really been inside a police station much ever before in my life, it was pretty horrific. I'm still really in shock from that experience, although it was in 2013. The treatment of people once you're in custody is just quite unbelievable.
Were you given a legal representative?
I was given the opportunity to, but I declined because I just had decided that whatever I said in trying to get a crime investigated was not going to be beneficial, so I decided to just remain silent. Whilst I was there, I was quite badly injured. I actually found the custody people, it was the women that were actually more vicious than the male officers. My arm, I don't know if you've ever, hopefully you never have to, but in custody, the doors to the cells are very, very large, thick doors, and I had one of these doors smashed on my arm. In fact, I thought my arm was broken, and I asked to have some medical attention and for the medical officer to photograph the injuries. And a guy came in a black t-shirt with G4S on it, and basically looked at my arm, laughed and just walked away, so I couldn't even get the fact that I was injured recorded or have any medical attention, so it was pretty horrific. It was a very hot day. It was in the middle of the summer, one of the hottest summers, and I asked for water. I was given a polystyrene cup full of boiling water to drink, so it was just, it's just, particularly for people like us who've never, done anything criminal or any sort of criminal activity, it's quite shocking that, you go into this room and it's just horrific. You have to ask for a sheet of toilet paper. It's just, it's quite unbelievable. The fact that you're there, you're a criminal. The presumption of innocence does not exist. You've been arrested as far as they're concerned. You're there because you could be a mass murderer. The way that you're treated. So I was kept in custody from sort of 10:30 in the morning to about 8:30 at night. When this guy first arrested me, I was strip searched by him in a room on my own. And then after he'd done that, he brought 3 female officers in. He tipped my bag upside down, and I asked him what he was looking for, and he said, I'm looking for your house keys, which weren't in my bag. And I said, why do you need my house keys? And he said, well, you can either hand them over to me or I'm going around to your house to kick your door in. My keys were actually in my car, which was parked quite away from the police station. So then I was frog-marched, surrounded by police officers to my car, so that I could hand over my house keys. My car was then searched as well. It was just horrific, really. And then there were no charges. There was nothing happened as a result of that particular day. About 6 months later, I received a call from the police asking me to. They did go around to my house and completely stripped my house, and just. I'm still finding things now that are missing, so I don't know exactly what it was they took, because they didn't leave me an inventory of what they'd removed. But they did call me and say, you can come to the police station and collect your property. I hadn't realised that that's a ploy to just get you back, and course, I went to collect my property. I wanted my mobile phone back and things of value that I knew they had. I arrived at the police station. Oh, they asked me to come to the police station on a Monday when it's closed. So I had to wait to see somebody. And the same guy jumped on me again and said that I was under arrest. And by that point, I was just, well, what for this time? Because I thought, well, you know, I've come to collect property, now I'm arrested again. And when I asked why I'd been arrested this time, he said, well, you've been under arrest since July. And I said, well, that's not possible. How can somebody be under arrest for nearly 6 months? So, you know, it's just huge levels of what I perceive are mistreatment, inappropriate treatment of innocent people just to meet targets. Because, of course, that was 2 arrests for doing absolutely nothing. They don't have to categorise outcomes of those arrests, but they do have targets for arresting people. So that was 2 arrests, effectively, that met a target somewhere. I still haven't received all my property back. I still don't really know exactly what they still might have. And I have gone down the route of making a complaint, but as we all know, that's an ineffective process, trying to access justice. But I had to change my locks because I found clearly when they took my house keys, copies were made of them. I felt very violated because of the sorts of things in my home that they'd gone through, personal things. And it was clear to me for very many weeks after, this same guy that arrested me would sit outside my house in a car, plain car, in plain clothes. I was followed all the time. And it's what I perceive as silencing tactics. I've got information. As part of that crime, when I tried to report it, I wrote to David Cameron, I wrote to Michael Gove, I wrote to Ian Duncan-Smith, I wrote to Vince Cable, all the people at the top of the tree that are ultimately responsible for allowing that crime to continue. And it's still continuing. And you're powerless to get crime investigated. That's just something that's affected me personally. Other things that have affected me personally in my role as a Mackenzie friend have been things like, and personally myself, and an ongoing case that I've got going through the courts, is non-access to the records, as Guy Taylor was talking about this morning, trying to get access to the case management file. They don't comply with that. You go through a whole process. I was in court earlier this year, and it was a new judge. He clearly knew nothing about the case, although he said that he rang. That I got a call from the court the day before to say, "Oh, the judge doesn't want to hear this case at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. Can we do it at 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon? Can we do it at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning?" And I said, "No. This case was set down last October, and I'll be there at 2 o'clock." So the judge, it was obviously a Friday afternoon, and he wanted to go home early. And when I got there in the afternoon, he said, "Oh, I had nothing to do this morning. I spent all morning reading your file." And I said, "Oh, that's very good. You'll know all about it." But he clearly knew nothing about it. And he said, "What's this case about today?" "Oh, it's an appeal, an application for an appeal." And I said, "No, Your Honour, the application's been approved. This is for the appeal." And the barrister, who's representing one of the big banks, stepped forward with a sheet of paper to hand to the judge and said, "Oh, this is the nature of the case today, Your Honour, because I've written the court order from the last hearing." At which point I turned to the barrister and said, "You've written a court order? You can't write an order of the court." I asked the judge if the court was lawful, if he was sitting in a lawful court, and how that could happen, and he quickly said, "Oh, take that away and get Mrs. Woodward a copy of it." And I said, "Well, I'm not accepting a copy of it because under disclosure rules, I'm supposed to have seen that 21 days ago, but an order from the court can only be written by the court." So we've got barristers who are employed now by the big banks going into courts, writing orders for the court. And I could tell you a myriad of other things that I've come across in my role, but it would take me all day, basically. So, corruption, the whole system is corrupt, from the police, the false allegations that, or worried with people being subjected to false charges, and just carried along on a wave, basically. Okay?
Thank you so much.
Give some more moral support to Robert Grieg in his fight for justice for Hollie Grieg and in his fight for his own freedom. And I thought I'd just share with you a few anecdotes and thoughts on what that struggle has been like. It's remarkable how little bits of truth that are told and you hear actually come back to empower you at times which you can't quite predict. You might not even be aware where you got the original idea from, but truth is like that. It has a life of its own. And several years ago, I was listening to a Canadian chap who founded the Freeman movement, a chap called Robert Menard, talk about the law. And the law is obviously something that he feels is very important, and it's a big part of his life, and he speaks on it with passion. And he was explaining that under a common law jurisdiction, we're all equal. We all put on trousers one leg at a time. That authority is authority that you grant someone over you, and that if you're doing that, that person has to behave with dignity and with honesty. And I took that lesson away, and I didn't know when I would ever use it. Robert Grieg was locked up in Perth, and I started to visit him in prison and get to know him and get a little bit involved. One aspect of the case, which has caused me personally most concern over whether I live in a fair and reasonable society or not, is the fact that there has been a secret fund of money in the Crown Office and Procurator Fiscal Service of Scotland that is used to fund legal services for their own staff and former staff. So if any member of the Crown Office and Procurator Fiscal Service becomes accused of a crime, or becomes involved in a civil legal dispute, or becomes involved in some embarrassment that the press are going to criticise, and the press might be threatened with legal action, that legal action, that civil legal action, is paid for by the United Kingdom taxpayer through an unaudited fund, it would appear, in the Crown Office. So we started asking questions, and one of the questions we put in a Freedom of Information request to the Crown Office was about this secret unaudited fund, and whether Elise Angelini, the former Lord Advocate of Scotland, which is the highest law officer in Scotland, a political appointee and a member of the Cabinet, had actually used this secret unaudited fund of public money to carry out a civil prosecution against Robert Grieg. So I put in 4 requests for information under the Freedom of Information Scotland Act, and I didn't. The requests for information were denied on grounds that it wasn't in the public interest to reveal the information, or actually more specifically on grounds that while it was in the public interest to reveal this information, there was an even more public interest in not revealing this information. And that even more public interest is so secret that they couldn't tell me what it was, because to tell me what it was would reveal the secret. I've since been told that to tell me what the secret public interest is would in fact be contempt of court. I have no idea what that means, but we plan to find out. So there was. I think we had a friend in the Crown Office. Somebody gave us some information in the letter that rejected our Freedom of Information request, rejected all aspects of it, said we weren't getting information. But in the preamble paragraph to this rejection, it says, I can confirm that the Crown Office does hold this information, and that the only funds ever paid to Levy and McRae by the Crown Office related to the case of Elise Angelini versus Robert Grieg. So we had documentary evidence for the first time that the Crown Office had funded Dame Elise Angelini's private civil prosecution of Robert Grieg. And we thought at the time that that was a good piece of information and it might come in handy. Months later, Robert mentions to me that he's being pressured by the Court of Session and the barrister of Elise Angelini to pay a large sum of money. I think from memory it was £27,000 as a taxation against the expenses related to the civil prosecution. So we had a little think about this. And thinking on what Robert Menard and other people who put some truth out into the world had taught me about the law, it struck us that there was no clear evidence that Dame Elise Angelini had actually suffered a loss or would ever suffer a loss, because we had evidence that the costs of the case were covered by the UK taxpayer. So we thought we'd answer the question. Now, I would point out, when you're asking the Scottish Government in any form of questions, the minimum period of response is 21 days. Often it takes longer. This is to slow down the dialogue. So if you get anywhere, it takes months or years. So we put a letter into the Court of Session. And this pointed out and gave evidence, and written evidence and documentary evidence, that the case against Robert had been funded by the UK taxpayer. And raised the concern that all this money being claimed at taxation might also be funded by the UK taxpayer, and that the court might therefore be involved in fraud, and explained that we wish to protect the court from being involved in a fraudulent activity, and asked the court to procure the information to confirm that this money had or would be paid by Dame Elise Angelini, and we explained that invoices would do, or sworn affidavits would do. We would be, flexible as the nature of this documentation. And we gave them a good long period to answer. So we sent this off, expecting the normal 21 days plus delay. That was Thursday. Robert phoned me on Saturday morning, and he said, "You'd never guess what came in today. I've got a reply from the Court of Session already." And the reply said, "What you said is complete nonsense. Here's a case that we will cite that will show that this has no standing, this has no place in the matter. You have to undergo this taxation hearing and pay the taxation." And looking at the case, it was a case where someone had argued that the timing of the payment by a litigant of these legal expenses was somehow significant. So we wrote back and we said, "No, this is nonsense. It's nothing to do with timing. We're not questioning whether Dame Elise Angelini has already paid the money or will in future pay the money. This is irrelevant. The courts view it as irrelevant. We view it as irrelevant. What we're interested in is whether Dame Elise Angelini will ever pay the money. We require documentary evidence to confirm that there will be a loss. And if we don't get it," and we gave them a good long period, 3 months or so. By the end of this period, we will consider the matter to have been abandoned by Dame Elise Angelini and closed. So we got a fairly prompt reply back again. They said that they would be answering this in the allotted time, and we should stand by and await the response. And we then got crickets. There was nothing, there was silence. Nothing from the Court of Session. And the date that we were given, which was months in the future, actually expired on the 24th of December. So Dame Elise Angelini abandoned her claim of £27,000 from Robert Grieg, and that was a little win in Little Woods. I've got many anecdotes about the fight in the Scottish justice system. I'll give you one other one which is particularly poignant. Robert was arrested in England by Scottish police, with English police as well. He was lifted from his home and he was spirited away and he was put before a judge in Scotland and he was remanded in custody and put into HMP Perth. And then every so often he'd go in front of a judge, and his legal team, who were very good, Scottish legal team, good men, were arguing that he should be bailed. And bail was denied, and bail was denied, and bail was denied. One of the hearings which he was not at, bail was denied partly because the fiscal, the senior fiscal in Aberdeen, stood up in a court and told the judge that Robert Green had been handing out leaflets about the Hollie Grieg case outside Aberdeen Sheriff Court in Union Street. This is not true. Robert Green has never in his life handed out leaflets in that position. In fact, since the one time he tried to hand out leaflets in Aberdeen many years ago, he was immediately arrested before he could do it. He's never handed out a leaflet in Aberdeen at all. And this information was not true. And it came, Robert wasn't at that hearing, it came to his attention. So he wrote to the fiscal and said, I've been told this information is not true, could you please give me an explanation? The response was silence. So he wrote to him again, and the response was silence. So they wrote to him a third time, and the response was silence. So what do? He believes that someone has perjured himself in a court in Scotland. Well, you report it to the police. So he did. He reported it to Perth Police, and 2 detectives came up to interview him. And he pleaded very well. He asked them a question, first of all, before it started. Is everybody equal under the law in Scotland? Oh, yes. Yes, this is Scotland. This is a society governed by the rule of law. Everyone is equal under the law in Scotland. Excellent, says Robert. And starts to then describe what the fiscal had said. Well, there's a problem, you see. You see, that's the fiscal. We only investigate anyone in the fiscal's office if the fiscal tells us to. And the fiscal won't tell us to, so we can't do anything. So Robert's confused. He says, you just said that everyone's equal under the law in Scotland. I heard you, I've written it down, and you've definitely said that. Yes. But not the fiscal. And the 2 detectives said, look, we're just telling you how it is. So you had people who were, I'm sure, every bit as good as most police officers, right? There are probably people who would put themselves at considerable personal risk to help people in an emergency, and I'm not saying anything against the police officers. But the system had grown up to such an extent that they accepted, without thinking about it, without engaging critical thinking facilities, that in effect, anyone in the Procurator Fiscal Service is above the law. This is not right. So there is a complaint, I think it's still circulating around the Scottish court system. There is a complaint about this. The fiscal himself will have to answer questions on this at some point. And if the fiscal was repeating information which he believed to be true, but which was in fact false, then we're not interested in holding the fiscal to account for that. We just want to know who made the false statements. It seems that there were a lot of false statements made against Robert, because 95% of the charges he was facing had in fact been dropped. So we will hope to find out more about where these false statements came from. Time for one more? Let me just tell you, just to close off, I'll tell you about Robert leaving prison. We had gone through several bail hearings, and bail was refused, bail was refused, bail was refused. We went up to Aberdeen. It's a long journey, so Robert's out, 3 hours in the back of a van, airless van, but another 3 or 4 hours waiting in the cell before he gets into court. And we're going through another bail hearing, and the fiscal is again opposing bail. And he submits to the court Robert's rap sheet, previous convictions. And the judge looks at it and says, "He's been convicted before, you know you are." The judge looks at just me. And it was a very serious offence. And the judge looks at it, but only one. This was the previous breach of peace condition. And this current offence is very serious. The judge looks. You've decided to downgrade it to a summary offence, which is only 60 days. Sorry, no, sorry, 6 months maximum sentence. At this point, Robert had been in for over 3 months. So the judge weighed all this up and decided Robert would get bail. The fiscal immediately appealed. The judge nodded, right, that's appeal. You're remanded until the appeal's heard. And Robert was immediately swept away. So he was just told he'd be bailed and then taken away down to the cells, thinking, what happened? I mean, it was over in a few seconds. We didn't know what had happened, really. So they were holding me on remand until until this appeal was heard. When would that be? So we found out it was going to be the next Wednesday. Now, when you're appealing against a decision, you've got a bit of a mountain to climb. But this time, the fiscal was appealing against the decision, so he had a mountain to climb. So we had a chance. And Robert phoned me at 3 in the afternoon, and I'd just been told the High Court's held the appeal hearing. They've upheld the original decision. I'm being bailed. I'll be out in half an hour. Right, I'm on my way. So I phoned a couple of people who wanted to be there, and I scooted off round to the prison. And after a little while, out it popped, and it's an enormous. It's a very inhuman sort of door. When they release someone, they release them through the main security gates of the prison, which are vehicle gates for taking HGVs. So these enormous gates, and there's 2 like an airlock. So you come in one and then the other one opens. So you hear the mechanisms working as someone's coming through. And you hear the gears start to turn before the gates open. And then it opens and it's a laundry van or something. And at the third opening, it was Robert. Out he came into the sunshine. Beautiful May sunshine, gorgeous day. And he says, I'm sorry, you have to apologise. I'm a bit emotional because I've just had a bit of a send-on. Robert, being the sort of man he is, he helps a lot of people. He'd helped some of the young lads in jail that maybe weren't too good with the written word. He was helping them write letters. He was reading letters to them from home. And they knew what he was in for. They knew what the case was. They know it very well, actually, what the prison population in Scotland know the case very well. And when they heard he was getting out, they all lined the balconies, and it's an old-fashioned prison, Perth. It's very it's like Slade on porridge. It looks exactly like that inside. So all the prisoners lined the balconies and clapped and cheered and applauded him all the way out of the prison. And the prison pastor ran across the grounds to congratulate him and wish him well. And then out he came into the sun, and that was a good day.
So we've got a question and answer session now, and we'd like you to come